Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm so excited to share my little swatch and review of Starrilly's Jellyfish Journey collection. I recently picked these up myself because I have always heard great things about Starrilly's jellies and I wanted to see for myself how they compared to others on the market. So as usual, I will save more of my thoughts for the end after comparisons. For now, let me just show you the swatches. First up, we have Flame Jelly, which is described as a bright red sheer jelly. So I would say it's pretty accurate for the most part, though I feel like this does have a slightly hot pink kind of undertone to it that I think will be a lot more noticeable during comparisons later. Formula-wise though, this had incredible coverage. You can see the first coat alone was super pigmented and also very even, so I feel like you can totally wear this in one coat if you wanted that super glassy stained glass kind of look, or of course you can build it up in 2 or 3 coats for a little bit more color intensity, though it's not really gonna obscure your nail line all that much. It really is super glassy. Next up we have Bloodbelly Jelly, which is a medium burgundy red. So this basically had the same formula as the last shade where it's super pigmented and very even on the first coat, but again I will be building it up in 2 and 3 coats just to show you how much more coverage you get and how the color deepens too. And speaking of the color, I think I would call this more of a berry red. Like there is a slightly purple undertone to it, but I don't know, I don't think it's deep enough to call it a burgundy in my opinion, though I guess a berry is a brighter burgundy. Maybe it's like a tomato situation. Either way, this was another gorgeous color. I also found the nail line was pretty obscured on the 3rd coat, probably because it's so dark. Getting into the purples, the first one we have is Crown Jelly, which is a warm-toned purple jelly. This had another great formula that was very highly pigmented and smooth to apply. I would say it was even coverage for the most part on the first coat, but it definitely evened out better on 2 coats. I also found that on the 2nd coat, it was pretty dark where I had a hard time making out my visible nail line. So if your nails are much shorter, I think all you would need is 2 coats, but you might want 3 if your nails are longer. I again personally didn't think it was necessary. Then we have Moon Jelly, which is the cool-toned indigo jelly of the lineup. So this is a much more blue-toned purple compared to the last shade, and the formula on this was just as lovely as the others, probably most similar to Crown Jelly, where it wasn't 100% even on the first coat, but it does even out on the 2nd. And again, because it's just so dark, it pretty much obscured my visible nail line, at least enough where I didn't think a 3rd coat was necessary for my taste. Even though it is super dark, you can still tell that it's a deep indigo color. The true blue in the collection is called Bluefire Jelly, which is described as a sapphire blue. So I guess I can see that once the color does build up, but on the first coat you can see it has this really vibrant color to it. I don't know if this is cerulean, but it's just that specific bright shade of medium blue with a whisper of a teal undertone. While this had the same kind of easy formula as the others, I feel like I noticed a little bit more visible nail line on the 2nd coat for this one, so I actually did throw on a 3rd coat, which I think brings out more of that darker sapphire blue color. But it's definitely really passable on 2 coats alone. It has really nice even coverage and the color is really gorgeous, so I think this one's a little extra versatile because the color does deepen a little bit going from 2 to 3 coats. The last of the colorful jellies we have is Crystal Jelly, which is described as a teal green. So that's definitely pretty color accurate, and I would say the formula on this was really nice too, though again, maybe not as even coverage as the first 2 reds. I think it builds up decently on 2 coats alone, where similar to the last shade, you can easily get away with just the 2, but when I was looking really closely, I could see some unevenness, so I did also throw on a 3rd coat for this one, and as expected, it does deepen the color a good amount where the visible nail line is more obscured, the color is just a little bit darker, and it looks more even overall. Next we have Immortal Jelly, which is the sheer black. This had another really nice formula where it's slightly sheer on the first coat, giving this smoky charcoal kind of look, but it does build up really nicely on 2 coats where you can still make out some visible nail line, but it's also pretty obscured and smoky looking. It reminded me a lot of Smoky Quartz, which I really loved, but of course I did also do a 3rd coat just to see how it builds up, and as expected, it is a lot more full coverage. I mean, I feel like even the 2 coats that you see here looks very full coverage, but in real life I could still see some visible nail line, but it was a lot harder on 3 coats. And lastly, we have Ghost Jelly, the sheer white. So this had another really fantastic and smooth formula that was incredibly even coverage on the first coat alone. I was really impressed with how it self-leveled, so even though it is white, I think it can still pass for a your nails but better look, or just something to brighten up your nails. And as expected, this built up beautifully in both 2 and 3 coats, where I would say it had the most milky look of them all, where you're obviously still going to see some visible nail line because it's a sheer, but there's a slight cloudiness to it and how it's obscured, where it's just not as glassy looking as the other jellies. And here are the first 5 shades in the collection worn as a skittle in 2 coats each. I wanted to show these all together because I feel like they just make such a perfect gradient. So from my thumb to pinky, I'm wearing Flame, Bloodbelly, Crown, Moon, and then Bluefire Jelly. Even for wearing just 2 coats in direct sunlight, I feel like I couldn't see that much visible nail line. I don't know if it was just the color that's making it look super bright, but obviously you can still see the translucency through my tips. And then in lower lighting, the darker shades, specifically Moon Jelly, does look pretty dark and opaque, but I feel like you can still tell that it's a deeper indigo. And then I have the last 3 shades here where I still have Bluefire on my pinky, then Crystal on my ring, Immortal on my middle finger, and Ghost Jelly on my pointer. Again, this is still 2 coats of everything. And as expected, Ghost Jelly is the most sheer, and I feel like you can just see clearly what I mean now, how it just has a different look where it's not as glassy as the other jellies, but it still had an incredible formula. I really loved all of these. Moving on to comparisons, we're starting with Flame Jelly, and I actually wanted to compare this next to ILNP's Cherry, which is a true cherry red. I don't know how well it's picking up on camera or on your screen for that matter, but Cherry is definitely that true red. Hopefully you can see that Flame has a little bit of that hot pink color. So of course that means I had to also show it next to some hot pink jellies like ILNP's Malibu and Cirque's XOXO jelly. Both of these are true hot pink. Flame, by comparison, does lean a little bit more red. It's also a bit darker and just more saturated as well. Here on the first coat, though, is where you see most of that hot pink kind of color, but doing the second coat makes it a little bit more red leaning. So I definitely wouldn't call any of these dupes. For a quick bottle reference, here it is next to Crack's Back to the Fuchsia, which is their hot pink jelly, but hopefully you can tell that one is just way too bright and light. I think I would say it's also more of a cooler toned hot pink shade, so definitely not a dupe, but I would say the closest to being a potential dupe is LA Color's Heat Wave, which is very exciting considering this is like a $2 bottle. I would say the biggest difference is their amount of pigmentation, where LA Colors on the first coat is a little bit more sheer, but if you do build it up in 2 coats, it does look similar to Starrily in 1 coat, though again, once you do that second coat for Starrily, it makes it lean a little bit more red. Next for Bloodbelly Jelly, I knew I had to see this next to Cirque's Bitten Jelly and ILNP's Dahlia, both of which are these berry red kind of colors, though as I'm sure you can tell in the bottle, Bloodbelly does lean the most red looking, or at least it's the brightest of the 3. So I am going to be showing these in 1 and 2 coats built up so you get an idea of their color payoff, their pigmentation. They honestly make a perfect kind of gradient, but color-wise, I would say Bitten is the closest, just a little bit more purple. And even though you did see them in the Skittle portion, I did want to show Bloodbelly and Flame just next to each other on the nail because I thought they did look kind of similar. So hopefully you can really tell the difference here, where Flame just has a little bit of that hotter, almost pinky undertone that builds to a brighter sort of red, while Bloodbelly is just generally darker and slightly cooler. And for anyone curious, here is Bloodbelly Jelly next to Olivav's Kindle, which recently came out. This is their darkest red, and it's pretty dark, especially compared to Bloodbelly, but they're kind of in the similar color family. Moving on to Crown Jelly, here it is next to Cirque's Royal and Eros Jelly, which are their darkest purple jellies. Royal, though, is more cool toned, so I knew that Eros was just going to be closer to the color of Crown Jelly, but I think in the bottle, Royal looks a little bit closer just because it's a lot darker. So you can definitely tell the difference in all of them when you do 1 and 2 coats of each, but I decided to do a 3rd coat of Eros Jelly, and it looked pretty similar to Crown, so I would almost call them dupes. And of course, I also have to show this next to ILNP's Nightshade, which was their purple from the Thorns collection. As you can tell, this is incredibly dark, where once you build it up in 2 coats, it basically looks black, so you kind of lose all the purple color, but I think the first coat looks kind of similar to Crown. Then for Moon Jelly, I figured I could still show it next to ILNP's Nightshade since Moon Jelly was the darkest of the 2 purples. But again, that one's more of that indigo color, so there's a stronger blue undertone, which made me think LA Color's Oasis would be a bit closer. And it definitely is in color, but unfortunately not in pigmentation. As you can tell from the first 1 and 2 coats, it is a lot more sheer. And doing 2 coats of Moon Jelly looks similar to Nightshade in 1 coat as far as the coverage goes. Next for Bluefire, I wanted to quickly show this next to LA Color's Wispy Blue and Cirque Color's Cobalt Jelly, which are just 2 other bright blue jellies in my collection, but hopefully you can tell these are just much lighter and brighter, so they're lacking that deeper color intensity that Bluefire has. So I would say the closer Cirque jellies are Indigo and Midnight. I feel like in the bottles alone, Midnight looks like it would be the closer dupe to Bluefire because it's just really dark, but on the nail, it does have this more muted kind of navy blue color to it. Indigo really does have a similar saturation and vibrancy to Bluefire, so the color isn't an exact match. I think it is still a little more muted in Cirque, or maybe it's just a shade darker. To me, Bluefire looks the most intense with the color, but Indigo is still pretty close. Some other similar dark blue jellies that I have are Crack's Midnight Phase and of course ILNP's Midnight Ink. Between these 2, I thought they were going to be pretty close dupes to Bluefire, both in terms of their color and their saturation, but they look surprisingly different on the nail. From the first coat, I think I would say that ILNP is a little bit closer in terms of that cerulean kind of color, but surprisingly, Bluefire was the most sheer of these 3. So doing 2 coats of each made Cracked and ILNP look practically opaque, while Starrily looked very glassy. So I ended up doing a 3rd coat for Bluefire just to deepen the color a little bit, and it still wasn't a dupe. Next for Crystal Jelly, here it is next to Cirque's Kelly Jelly as well as LA Color's Green Tea, which sadly is not around anymore, but either way, these 2 are just much brighter, truer, grassy green kind of shades. Since Crystal is so dark and teal, I knew it was going to be much closer to something like Cirque's Verdigris Jelly, and of course I'm still going to show it next to ILNP's Ivy. Even though that one's more of a true dark forest green, there's no blue undertone like in Crystal Jelly. So on the first coat, you can see that Crystal is similar in color to Verdigris, but just much more saturated, so it's more similar to Ivy in that way. Though doing a 2nd coat, Ivy basically builds up to be almost fully opaque, while Verdigris on 2 coats looks like Crystal in 1, if that makes sense. You basically just need an extra coat of the Cirque to look similar to Starrily. Then for Immortal Jelly, here it is next to Cirque's NSFW jelly, which is their black jelly. Since Immortal was surprisingly sheer, it actually looked pretty similar to NSFW in terms of their coverage. So I'm going to be showing both of these in 1, 2, and 3 coats so you can see just how much they build up. Obviously, it still could vary depending on your application and how heavy-handed you are, or if you prefer doing thinner coats, but I think Starrily is a little bit more pigmented and full coverage on the 3 coats, and it's also a bit warmer in undertone. And lastly, for Ghost Jelly, here it is next to Cirque's Linen and ILNP's Coconut Milk. So I'm not sure how well you can see here, but Cirque's is a little bit off-white, almost having this ivory kind of color to it, but for all intents and purposes, it definitely looks like a milky white on the nail. But in the bottle, I would say ILNP looks the closest to Ghost Jelly. So I'm going to be showing all 3 of these built up in 1, 2, and 3 coats, and I'd say between the 2, ILNP would be the closer to being a potential dupe, but it is still a little bit more sheer. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of Starrely's Jellyfish Journey collection. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts on these because I really love them. I thought they had such great formulas overall, and I loved how pigmented they were while still having that really glassy jelly finish. My only real complaint is just the color palette is so limited where, you know, we basically got 2 reds and 2 purples. I know that they are slightly different, but I would have just loved to see more shades. And I don't even remember when exactly this collection first launched. I feel like it's been a couple of years at least. And it's kind of surprising that they just haven't put out any additional jellies because I feel like they really have such a great formula. Though I will say I have noticed on social media, they have asked if, you know, people would be interested in seeing more of this finish. And you know me, I was like, yes, please. So fingers crossed we actually will see some more colors to this line. But I also completely understand that a lot of people kind of have said that, you know, with Starrily and like their typically higher price point, it's just better off, you know, sticking to more specialty finishes because they do those really well too. And don't get me wrong, I do agree with that, but I don't know, I feel like their jellies are really good and I feel like they are pretty affordable too. These retail for $13 each and come in 15 milliliter size bottles. And again, for the pigmentation and like the coloring that you get, I feel like it's just that perfect sweet spot, especially compared to brands like Cirque and ILNP's recent jellies. These just feel like that perfect Goldilocks right in the middle of at least what I want for jellies. But again, that's just personal preference. I know a lot of people still really loved those super dark, almost black jellies that came out from ILNP. And of course, Cirque still has like a really great catalog, though I would say for them, their biggest strong suit is their color selection. When it comes to pigmentation, you know, they're not the best, but it just depends on the kind of look that you're going for, because they do build up really well. So, you know, they have their pros and cons. So as always, I would love to hear your thoughts down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.